The light is almost too bright to look at directly. Through the narrow opening in the ceramic shell, something inside is glowing white. Not red, not orange, but white. The temperature in there has already crossed 2000 degrees Celsius, and it's still climbing. A small piece of aluminum that was solid 30 seconds ago is now a pool of liquid metal sitting calmly at the bottom of the chamber. This is an electrical arc furnace, and it runs on the same principle that powers the massive industrial furnaces used to make steel, just scaled down to something you can build on a workbench. The science behind it is surprisingly elegant. When two carbon electrodes are brought close together and connected to a high current power source, the electricity jumps the gap between them. That jump, that arc, isn't just a spark. It's a sustained column of superheated plasma. And plasma is one of the hottest things you can create outside of a nuclear reaction. The arc itself reaches somewhere between 3000 and 4000 degrees Celsius at its core. That's hot enough to melt iron, copper, aluminum, and most metals you'd work with at home. It's also hot enough to be genuinely dangerous, which is why this build demands full respect. Proper eye protection rated for arc welding, heat-resistant gloves, and a completely non-flammable work surface before any of this begins. Now, the build itself. The chamber is the first thing that has to exist before anything else. A ceramic flower pot, the unglazed terracotta kind, works surprisingly well as the outer shell. It's cheap, it handles heat reasonably well for the outer layer, and it's easy to shape. But the inside of the chamber needs something more capable. Castable refractory cement, the kind sold for lining kilns and wood stoves, gets mixed to a thick consistency, roughly the texture of wet clay, and packed into the inside of the pot to form a smooth, even lining about 2 to 3 centimeters thick. Two small holes get pressed through the wall opposite each other near the bottom of the chamber, just large enough for the electrodes to pass through at a slight angle, angling downward so their tips meet near the center of the floor. The cement needs at least 24 hours to cure at room temperature, and then a very slow initial firing, starting at low heat with a heat gun or in an oven, to drive out any remaining moisture. Refractory cement that hasn't been properly dried can crack violently or even pop when it first encounters real heat, so this step doesn't get skipped. The electrodes themselves are the heart of the whole system. Carbon arc gouging rods, the flat, copper-coated rods used in heavy metalwork, are ideal. They're made of compressed graphite. They conduct electricity exceptionally well, and they can handle the temperatures involved without degrading quickly. Each rod gets slid through one of the holes in the chamber wall and secured with a small amount of refractory cement around the entry point to seal the gap and hold the angle. The tips should sit about 3 to 5 millimeters apart at the center of the chamber floor. That gap is everything. Too wide and the arc won't establish cleanly. Too close and it won't have room to breathe. The power source for a small furnace like this is a stick welder. Specifically, a DC arc welder running somewhere between 70 and 100 amps. The welder's ground clamp connects to one electrode rod, and the electrode holder connects to the other. This is not a project for a wall outlet or an improvised battery bank. The current requirements are real, and using an underpowered source produces only a weak, sputtering arc that can't build enough heat to do anything useful. A proper arc welder provides stable, sustained current, which is exactly what the arc needs to stay alive and build temperature inside the chamber. Before the first test, a small amount of metal goes into the chamber. A few grams of aluminum broken into small pieces so it heats faster and more evenly. Aluminum is ideal for a first run because its melting point sits at only around 660 degrees Celsius, meaning it will melt quickly and confirm the furnace is working without requiring the arc to sustain for very long. The welder turns on. The electrodes are already positioned. And here's the moment where the furnace either works or it doesn't. The arc establishes almost immediately, a bright crackling column of light between the two electrode tips, throwing sharp shadows across the inside of the chamber. The sound is distinctive, a deep aggressive hiss, lower and steadier than a regular welding arc, with occasional sharp pops as the carbon surfaces shift slightly under the heat. The temperature inside the chamber begins climbing almost instantly. Within about 20 seconds, the aluminum pieces begin to sag at the edges. Within 40, the first piece loses its shape entirely. Within roughly 90 seconds from first arc to finished melt. The aluminum is a small, perfectly still puddle of liquid metal on the chamber floor, reflecting the light of the arc above it. The welder shuts off. The arc dies instantly. Through the opening, the puddle cools visibly. First, it loses its mirror surface. Then a skin forms across the top. Then it solidifies completely into a smooth disc that separates cleanly from the ceramic floor. What just happened at its core is the same process used in the foundries that produce structural steel. The industrial arc furnace is responsible for roughly a third of all steel manufactured globally. What's sitting here on the workbench is a toy by comparison, but the physics are identical. Plasma sustained by electricity, generating temperatures that no combustion flame can come close to matching. The ceramic chamber that contained it, the graphite rods that created it, the metal that surrendered to it, all of it obeying exactly the same rules that govern furnaces the size of buildings. The aluminum disc is still warm when the fingers close around it, smooth on one side, slightly textured on the other where it touched the refractory floor. Heavier than it looks. A few minutes ago it was scattered scraps. Now it's something solid, something made, shaped not by tools, but by the same force that lights up the sky during a storm.